Here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And Mr. Rayo, let me say, get this shameless self promotion out of the way because this program now graces in the presence of Spotify. So you can listen to this as a podcast. It'll go up about 2 hours or so after the show is done. So, in case you can't stay around for the whole live stream, or maybe you're just popping in for a little visit and think, well, maybe I might be interested to listen to this in my car or something. We'll put the show up on Spotify. The link is up on the chat board. Okay, so we are at another day where I sit with the boilerplate overhead, thunder, lightning, as close to 4 miles away from my house, and not a drop of rain, not a breath, not an ice pellet, not a snowflake, nothing. I could smell the rain, Joe. It was a severe thunderstorm warning that was put up by the Weather Service just southeast of me. Missed it again.
Yeah, well, we had about 4/100ths of an inch up here in the valley, Putnam Valley, and it was kind of an in and out, on and off kind of day. We had bright sunshine, then it got cloudy and kind of dark. We had some rain, and then we got sunny again, and then we went back to clouds. And this is, the first half of the day we had quite a bit more in the way of sun. Then once we got past noontime, that's when we started seeing the buildups and the darkness and the occasional hits from shower activity. And right now it's kind of cloudy out there, and I haven't had a chance to look at the very latest radar, but wouldn't surprise me any if we did have a few drops between now and later this evening.
Oh, Robert Brown asking, what is Spotify? It's a music app. And hopefully we will also be on Apple, on iTunes soon. Just kind of waiting to hear from them. Apple takes their sweet time, and also on Google. Sure, I'm sure it'll pop up on Google soon enough. But in the meantime, you can find us under Joe and Joe Weather Show on Spotify. And yeah, it's another day with these upper lows. I got into I made a very short but pointed response to some creature in northern New Jersey who was just incredibly upset because of the fact that there have been showers in the forecast over the last couple of days, and since the world clearly revolves around where she is and nowhere else, took me to task over the fact that been calling for rain for the last couple of days, and then she hasn't seen a drop. To which I pointed out that if one took the time to read one's website post, it had indicated A, the showers and downpours would be scattered, B, some people would see them and some people wouldn't. Unfortunately, dear, you did not win the torrential downpour lottery ticket, but maybe next time.
Well, there's always the good side to getting a bit of rain, like rainbows. I'm just looking here. My sister in Throg's Neck just sent me a gorgeous shot of a rainbow that she had from her terrace about 20 minutes ago. And she said, remember, nobody ever got a rainbow, baby, without first getting some rain.
Well, that's true. A lot of towering Q. A few people have commented where the storms form, because they're kind of in these little clusters. So if you're if you're outside of it, or after one passes by, you're left with a deep blue sky, a very beautiful sky. It looks like almost like Florida sky. And this is the
Tropical skies.
yeah, it
Yeah.
kind of looks like that. Yeah, you got this big cold upper low in New England that is still sitting there, but about to start moving and about to start to break down. So we should see better weather conditions here in our neck of the woods for tomorrow. And I'm still mostly optimistic Friday through Sunday, although there will be some spotty showers and thunderstorms popping up from time to time and from place to place. On I'm thinking Friday and maybe late Sunday, the chances are a little higher than Saturday. So now this is your cue, Joe, to say that you're thinking that Saturday is the day where we'll probably have the best chance, and that Friday and Sunday will have smaller chances.
Yeah, I think tomorrow will I just mentioned, I said a slight risk of an isolated shower or thunderstorm. Now, you say slight and isolated in the same sentence. You're thinking that it's going to be less than 20%, maybe more like 10% or one chance in 10 to get
Right.
rained on. So I think tomorrow pretty much is going to be a dry day. I think Saturday will be dry. Friday, yeah, with that backdoor front in the vicinity, we may see some buildup of shower or thunderstorm activity scattered about during the afternoon and part of the night, but it should not last very long. But if you're going to get wet, I think Friday of the 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or should I say Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I think the day that we may get wet or the best chance of getting wet might be on Friday.
Most of the country is actually going into this 4th of July weekend on a relatively quiet note. It's just the map's got a summary look to it. I guess that's probably my way of describing things. I'm just looking at the watches and warnings that are up on the Weather Service nationwide. If you look off the southeast coast, by the way, down Florida and in the Gulf states, you got a lot of spots where there's some special marine warnings that are up. So that's one issue that's going on today. It's not a major one. Heat advisories for the southern plains in Texas and southeast Louisiana. Once again, as I said yesterday, it's breaking news that it's hot down there. Still have some flash flood watches up for parts of western Tennessee, northern Mississippi, a couple of counties in Arkansas, a couple of counties in Kentucky, and a couple of counties in northwest Alabama. The west is mostly quiet and dry. And again, here in the east, there's nothing major here going on. So this is just really, we're kind of in typical summer mode. And just pulling up the latest satellite loop here, Mr. Rayo, and the upper low is very obvious in the Northeast. It's not a solid overcast like yesterday. I actually had a fair amount of sun here today. It's only late this afternoon that it finally clouded over. But while that was happening, all around New York City, and particularly on the Jersey side of New York City, there were some pretty hefty storms with some heavy rains around earlier this afternoon. That's where they clustered today. And now, of course, you see these bands that are rotating southeastward. Once we get past sunset, this will all die off, and then the boundary of this upper low, the web browser is not behaving itself. I went today. I cleaned up everything inside. I took off you know, cleaned out the cache and did a few other things just to make sure everything would work better, but it doesn't seem to be helping. But the periphery of this upper low is where you see some of these showers and storms that are out in the central plains, middle Mississippi Valley, parts of the southeast, and down in Florida. So the upper low its influence is extensive, but there's a zone right in the middle where there's a good amount of sunshine down in parts of Virginia, North Carolina, back through Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and on up into the Great Lakes.
Hopefully, we'll be able to get into a drier and more stable slot now that that upper low is beginning to pull away to the north and east for tomorrow. And then we'll watch as once again something rotates down from our north and east, and that's that backdoor weather front I just mentioned a little while ago, which may provide the impetus for a few widely scattered showers and storms here Friday afternoon into Friday evening. And then we'll get into maybe a little bit slightly more comfortable air mass on Saturday and slightly more in the way of drier air. That may help to preclude any thunderstorm or shower threat for Saturday and for a good part of Sunday as well. And of course, Saturday is the 4th of July. And normally I would say on 4th of July holiday, well, the weather looks good for all those great fireworks displays, but these fireworks displays have been chopped up and are basically piecemeal now.
Right, you have to be lucky enough to have a 5-minute Macy's display going on where you happen to be, because they're not telling you.
They're not telling you because they don't want people to gather and go against the social media advice of and I can see what they're talking about. Oh, there could be fireworks display down by the river. Let's all go.
Right, and then where you stand around and you go, ooh, Ah. Ooh.
The
Ah.
the surprise of a fireworks display back in 1985. The New York Mets and the Atlanta Braves played on the 4th of July, a baseball game in the evening, and it was promised to all those who came to the ballpark that night. They promised a grand and glorious fireworks display at the end of the game. Well, it was kind of a rainy night. They had 3 or 4 rain delays. It was kind of a hitter's night. I think the final score was something like 19-18. The game went 18 innings and didn't end until just shy of 4 in the morning. But they were honor bound. They had to put on the fireworks display, even though it was 4 o'clock in the morning. And the people who lived in the vicinity of the ballpark,
Must have been
all around the
thrilled.
ballpark, they called up the
Must have been
cops.
thrilled.
They called the cops up saying, "What the heck is going on?" It sounds like there's like bombs are out going outside, and it was it was the fireworks from the in the aftermath of the ball game. That's a surprise fireworks
Yeah,
display.
I think so.
That's all right.
I got the radar up right now just to show everybody what's going on here with the echoes in the Northeast, and just like yesterday, they were all they're clustered around, but different areas are getting it today versus yesterday. And if you look over Long Island, you can actually see they've gotten this loop is about 20 or 30 minutes behind. So the cells here on Long Island have kind of weakened some, but they're rotating around the upper low, and it's like spokes on a bicycle wheel. That's sort of how I describe it. And the upper low hasn't really moved at all in the last 3 days, but now we're going to see this start to drop southeastward and go southeast of Cape Cod. So we're going to be out of this for the most part tomorrow, which is a good thing. Meanwhile, just down in Florida, folks are seeing some showers and storms along the east coast of Florida, scattered around everywhere else. Also down in parts of coastal Georgia, seeing some showers and storms there. And then again, we mentioned about on the periphery, and that's where you've got some action. And we still getting some heavy rains here in western parts of Tennessee and northern Mississippi, and that's why we have those flood watches, those flash flood watches that we showed you on the national map. A little bit of action up in the northwest, up in parts of Montana, and in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to check on SPC to see what the severe weather risks are. And they actually, by the way, they did warn of a critical fire weather situation today in eastern Nevada and western Utah, which is where they have the um, red flag warnings up. You see these sort of pockets of marginal risk: southeast Virginia, eastern North Carolina, southern Georgia, northern Florida, in the western Tennessee, western Kentucky, into northern Mississippi, small pocket there in West Texas, and then another small pocket that you see up in northwest Montana. Marginal risk, Joe, being indicated for the next couple of days on their forecasts. For tomorrow, we have a marginal risk well up into upstate New York, northern New Hampshire, and Vermont and Maine, much of the state of Maine, on the marginal risk. And you see also the marginal risk lower Mississippi Valley to the Gulf states, back into the south central plains, and up in the northern plains, western North and South Dakota. Day 3, which is Friday, indicating just marginal risk out in the northern plains, back over into Montana. General thunderstorms in the northeast, general thunderstorms in the southeast, and a little dry patch in the middle. I'm not even going to bother to look at days 4 through 8. I can't imagine. Well, why not? Let me just bring it up on the
Yeah.
screen. Seriously, why do I fight these things? Uh, Gee, why is this? Oh, that's because I got it centered wrong. So day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, day 8, predictability too low, which generally means that we're not sure. So we're not going to take a position on this until we absolutely have to. So they're in good shape there.
I'm just looking at the CPC Climate Prediction Center maps, and on their probability maps, they have our area just outside a moderate risk, not a slight risk, but a moderate risk of excessive heat from July the 9th through the July 11th. So they are thinking perhaps that things are really going to start to heat up toward the end of next week. Wow, and it's a broad area, Joe. They've got a good part of well, they got a good part of New York and Pennsylvania in it, and then going all the way back west through the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and right into the nation's midsection, Nebraska and Oklahoma and Kansas and Texas. All of these areas with the potential for excess. But of course, they've already had and or are having right now in these zones excessive heat.
Yeah.
The heat indices are somewhere in the 100 to 115 range, depending upon where you happen to be. And it looks like some of that heat is going to kind of ooze or spread now north and eastward up in our direction by the latter part of next week.
Yeah, basically that's that east-west ridge that the model's forecasting for later next week to build across the U.S. and it builds in. It tries to build into the east. We mentioned the last couple of days. We've been saying how we might be just right on the edge of that. So we'll see if it does burst a little bit further to the east, then we could wind up getting 2 or 3 days of some very hot weather. But we also know that we're talking about uh, July 9th, 10th, and 11th, and that's a good 8 days from now.
Right.
WPC, by the way, the southeast, the Gulf states into northern Florida, sizable rains of 3 to 5 inches over the next 7 days. We're still fairly dry, although uh, the the upper low has at least alleviated the dry conditions up in New England to a certain extent. And over the next 7 days, there will be some opportunities for rainfall, although it's not a lot, but they're showing anywhere between a half an inch to an inch and a half over parts of upstate New York, down as far south as the Catskills, and then into New England, away from the east coast of New England. So there's some beneficial rain coming there, additional rain from what we've seen the last few days, and also up in the Dakotas, some solid rains of up to 3 to 5 inches. Otherwise, the west, except the northwest, is dry. The Ohio Valley is actually kind of dry, less than a tenth of an inch of rain forecast over the next 7 days. The Ohio Valley back through a good portion of the Great Lakes.
And meanwhile, July usually kicks off the monsoon rain season for places like New Mexico and Arizona. A lot of people, they think about it as the desert Southwest, but may not be aware that during the summertime, they usually see enough moisture to generate, locally heavy showers and storms or monsoon conditions in, again, parts of Arizona and New Mexico. And I notice on this particular map that you have of the QPF that a good chunk of northeastern New Mexico is in line for some moisture, and also scattered areas for western New Mexico and also for Arizona as well.
Meanwhile, as we'll bring up, we'll see what the models are doing here. Hopefully, my browser will behave itself because it's just not behaving itself the way it should be. Here we go. So I'm trying to put. I just changed the geography. It's not letting me. There's all sorts of weirdness going on. All right, let's try this again.
What are you trying for? Eastern U.S. or
No, I want to put North America region on.
North America?
And it's not letting
Well,
me.
it's obvious why it's not letting you. There's a lot of people in North America.
No, I
It's,
understand that, but why is it not giving me that region?
I don't know.
No, it's like everything is weird. Hang on. Nope, it won't. It won't let me click there for some reason. All right, so you know what? I'm stuck with this. We're gonna just go along with what we got. Let's see if I can. All right, hold on a second. Will it give me the up? Nope, it won't even change me to the upper air. So we're stuck with the surface. You're just gonna have to trust me, folks, on these maps. You can look at them later on Tropical Tidbits if you so choose. But again, looking up now it's decided to do something. Now it switched me to the upper air. Okay, so let's see if I can get the U.S. Yep. Okay. It finally started working again. You know, these somebody messaged me today, Joe, about the fact that there was an article on the CBS website about the fact that it's so hot the average world temperature is so above normal during, and then they kind of may try to make this connection that we were supposed to be in this low sunspot activity, so we should actually be seeing the Earth cooling. This is the premise of the article. It's not me saying.
Right.
And so therefore, we're, you know, the so therefore we must be on some tipping point where the Earth is going to, we're basically going to be burned to a crisp. My response to, well, I had two responses to that. One was the fact that, you know, apocalypses sell. Okay, okay, so you always have to be careful when you read this sort of stuff because the end of the world does get clicks. Also, considering the fact that it is 2020 and everything else that's going on, let the world burn, let us all burn to a crisp at this point, just to get it over with. But yeah, I would just be careful when you see stuff like that, folks. You know how how I feel about that sort of thing. But you know, here's our upper air. There's your upper low in the east, upper low in the west. Higher pressures right in the middle from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf states. And as I said, for tomorrow, the upper low is dropping southeastward. It is weakening and opening up. So that should stabilize the atmosphere here in the east. The ridge in the middle of the country actually gets stronger going into the weekend, starts to shift westward a little bit. So that allows another trough to swing into the east for early next week. And as we go through next week, you'll notice this is what Joe was referring to here with respect to what the Climate Prediction Center folks are talking about. There's an upper high uh, building across the southern part of the United States. So that just kind of pushes the jet stream up to the north. This is what usually happens this time of year, and it's extending east west. So the question is, do we get into that ridge, or does the ridge stay to the west to a large extent, or just to the west of the northeastern states, where we're getting a little bit of a flow from Canada to keep temperatures in check? Bear in mind this time of year, late June, early July, when you get a northwest flow from eastern Canada, it's not necessarily a cool flow. It's actually a warm flow that we're seeing here. There's not a whole lot of cool air that's up there. Most of that will be confined to perhaps up in parts of Labrador or eastern Quebec. But still, the big question as to whether we get into any kind of excessive heat later next week is whether that upper high can build far enough east to kind of displace that northwest flow in the northeast, uh, so that we can get into some hotter weather. But we're going to be kind of on the edge here, so we'll see how the models. Uh, we saw what happened, Joe, going into this week and going into the 4th of July, where we're seeing something similar to this set up for the time frame that we're in now, and lo and behold, that completely changed. So I want to be a little cautious here. There's no certitude here as far as getting into this heat for the end of next week.
Right. And well, when you think about the 4th of July, you think about hot and sticky weather. Although I will say this, Joe, if the ridge is building and it may get hot by later in the week, but the upper flow is mostly from the northwest, so
Right.
it's not going to be like we sometimes we get the heat pump effect from a Bermuda high offshore, and we get that southerly or southeasterly airflow, and it really gets very muggy. But with the upper flow out of the northwest, yeah, it'll get hot, but it won't be
The
quite
dew
as
points may actually be reasonable.
yeah,
The other
yeah,
thing is I'm looking at the European, and the European actually is a little bit different in that it does also build this upper high, but it's more to the west, back centered over Colorado and northern New Mexico. It doesn't have as much of an east-west flank the way the GFS does. So this would suggest that the hot weather will be confined to the central and southern plains and maybe even in the central Rockies. Even on day 10, which is next Saturday, the upper high starts to push into Nebraska and Missouri. You still have that northwest flow coming into the northeastern United States. So I agree with you. This is not a typical. This is not a Bermuda high, hazy, hot, humid type of setup. So
right.
we'll have to just wait and see when we get there.
Yeah,
And
and sometimes I get annoyed because when we're in the
That's
pattern where
I
we
know where
have
you're going with that, but go ahead.
we get into this the northwest wind, upper northwesterly wind pattern, and they say the same thing on TV or radio. They say hazy, hot, and humid. No, it's not. It's not overly humid. And with a northwest flow, generally speaking, it's not hazy either. You get that haze or
Right.
that schmutz. You get that schmutz or haze layer usually when you get that the atmosphere gets loaded up with all that moisture, and then it gets kind of hazy and muggy. And
Yeah.
but this is just going to be just plain hot.
What you just described, that's just lazy. That's just lazy. That's a forecaster just being lazy, I'm on the air at 5 o'clock, and I just walked in the door at 4:45, and I still have to go to makeup. So let me just reflexively say something that makes sense for this time of year.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's just lazy. I finally got that North America view. The reason why I wanted to bring it up was because I just want to show everybody the perspective with what's going on in the East with this upper low getting kind of trapped here. The separate flow that breaks down in Canada, the main flow is still well to the northeast. So the upper low basically got trapped, and of course we were getting these powerhouses coming into the northwest. And this is, by the way, as of this morning, the way it looked on the GFS. So as we take it through time, the upper low goes away, as we said, a couple of weeks short waves that we have to deal with over the weekend. And out in the Atlantic, uh, nothing yet signals to me anything unusual. We have a flat upper high sitting east of the Bahamas and going out into the open waters of the Atlantic. So you got this kind of westerly flow. I'm sorry, easterly flow, east to west flow from the tropical Atlantic into the Caribbean. You would expect to see that. And going forward, the Atlantic ridge is kind of on the flattish side. So we don't see a big, strong ridge out in the Atlantic. Not that that's anything unusual for this time of year, just kind of mentioning it. And by the way, just kind of on the new long, look at the new long range. You know how I always love the fact that the trend is your friend and how patterns love to repeat. Uh, you want to believe this after day 10. Looks like another system drops into the northeast, not too different from what we just had. We'll have to wait and see whether it winds up that way. And then there's a nice looking trough in the eastern part of the United States at the end of the forecast period. So this in no way suggests to me that we're looking at something that would be a 10-day heat wave. It's just not in the cards, or a 5-day heat wave. We're just going to be where we're supposed to be for this time of year. I think that's what I'm seeing going forward.
right.
And no big rain events either. That's the one possible downside. We really could use, really could take a day in the middle of the week and kind of wipe it out with some rain from start to finish, but that's not going to happen.
Well, I had a big argument today with the missus. I went out with the tractor mower, and Joe, our entire front and back lawn, besides the fact that it needed to get cut, but all these little white flowers, this clover
Yeah,
coming up,
the rabbits
and
love that stuff.
I believe me, I don't, but it was just too much. It almost looked like snow on the lawn.
Mm,
And she's telling me, make sure that you don't cut any lower than 4. I have various ways to either raise or lower the deck, so to speak, underneath the tractor mower. And she doesn't want me to go any lower than 4 because she's afraid that the grass is going to burn. And she went shopping. She came back and she looked at the grass. Most of the clover is gone now. And she said, "What was the height that you had on the mower?" And I said I put it at 3.5. And then she went ballistic. He said, "Why are you doing that? The grass is going to
she
burn."
said,
I said,
did she
I said,
say
"Here,
4?
huh?
Did she say 4?
Yes,
Okay, so you should have done it at 4, so that when she came back and she saw that you did it at 4, she could have looked at the grass as she would have said, maybe you should have done it at 3.5. So why don't you go
probably."
redo the lawn at 3.5?
But you see, the thing is, when I do it at 4, not much in the way the clover is cut down. It's still mostly there. At least with 3.5, I can slice them down or slice them off. But now she's upset about the fact that, oh, the grass is going to burn. Well, guess what? We have had now Saturday, Sunday, Monday,
You've
Tuesday,
had some
Wednesday,
rain up there.
five consecutive days of showery rains,
Hmm.
ranging anywhere from today, where we had about 5/100ths of an inch, to I think back on Saturday we had almost an inch. It's been the ground has been wet. It continues to get moisture. Now maybe not tomorrow we'll see any precip, but still the grass is still growing from all of that water that we've received over the last few days. So I said, the heck with this. I'll just cut, cut it. Um, but then she gets all,
You got yelled at.
one year it
The
got
bottom
so
line, you
dry.
got yelled at.
Yeah. Well, one year it got so dry here that number one, I didn't do the lawn for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Hold on, let me bring you back full screen. Go ahead.
And number two, along the fact I hadn't done the grass in like 2 or 3 weeks because it was so dry. But number two, when I stepped on the grass, it would crunch. I
Okay.
mean, that it's dry
Yeah, that's dry.
when that happens.
Uh, let's just go through let's go through the U.S. GFS map forecast here. No it doesn't show anything for tomorrow. I think it's probably a smart thing to mention, like you said, an isolated or a itsy bitsy or a teeny tiny shower or a thunderstorm. Actually, it does show something late in the afternoon
You want an
in a
itsy
couple of
bitsy piece?
spots or a
You want
teensy
an itsy
weensy
bitsy
piece.
piece or a teeny
TC
weeny
Wee,
piece?
right, exactly. Friday, you've got this weak backdoor, which the models have been kind of picking up on. So it looks like a little cluster of storms there. It's kind of weird. It's got a low southeast of Cape Cod Friday morning that it actually moves southwestward. It moves it west and southwestward. So suddenly the low is down in Delaware Bay by so there must be some kind of that's probably two separate waves. It is just that weak stall annoying frontal boundary. And then over the weekend, it just really isn't that much. Saturday doesn't look like there's any big chance. Sunday, you got another one of these weak fronts that approaches that maybe it triggers a thunderstorm or two, maybe it doesn't. And then going into next week, Joe, Monday, Tuesday, the only thing I want to just point out, we still have this short wave that's dropping southeastward into the north, into northern Florida, and then you get a low that forms off the southeast coast of the United States. Uh, the runs have been developing this back the last couple of days. Now, lately, they just kind of leave it behind and just settle on a weak low that's off the southeast coast. We'll just have to wait to see when we get there what kind of convection we're actually dealing with and whether that winds up developing into anything. It's too early for the Hurricane Center to mention it, but I will point out, because Anthony Orr pointed this out to me yesterday, if we were to get a named storm before July the 12th, it will be the earliest that we've ever gotten to the E storm.
Wow.
Okay, so July 12th, which is a week from Sunday, is going to be is a day to pay, for stat lovers to pay attention to. And you swing through this GFS through 16 days, and all you really see is what you would typically see with regards to July. Although it does show some sort of strong front here, around day 13, 14. So it may be a long time to wait before we get some widespread thunderstorm activity. That would be my broad analysis or a broad statement. Just looks like a
Right.
very warm, but not overly hot and mostly dry with just the occasional shower or thunderstorm to deal with, and quiet tropics. So
It's your typical July weather pattern. There was one pattern we had, I think it was in 2013 or 2014, where it never really got hot, never really got very humid. I called it the Garden of Eden summer because it was so unusual that we had such comfortable and lovely weather straight on through. But it does not look that way this year, at least in July. When we get to August, things begin to flip back toward as the days get shorter. We start to see more and more of those cold fronts from Canada. But it's July weather, Joe.
yeah.
What more can I say?
Bill Uber and I been chatting back and forth today about the fact that we both live under the same boilerplate. The so we stood by waiting for this thunderstorm that never happened. He's asking you, Mr. Mayo, if you have any bumblebees running around. Because I have not, to tell you the truth, I have not seen any bees this year at all.
I saw a couple of them actually today when I was out, doing the lawn. I did see a couple. but no, I don't. I haven't seen. You know, what I've been seeing a lot more of are these wasps, not the killer hornets from out west, but I've been seeing a lot more wasps or yellow jackets as opposed to bees or honeybees or bumblebees. I don't
Now,
know
I
what.
have not seen any bees at all, at all.
Hmm.
The birds are back here fighting over on the bird feeders. The jays. It was very interesting. I love watching blue jays. Blue jays are really cool. You know, they're very gregarious. They are. You get a few of them, a bunch. Sometimes they're in pairs. Sometimes they'll be in larger groups, and they seem to always be playing around, doing funny things. And I was watching one in my bird feeder that had a so there's sunflower seeds and a couple of other things, but there are these small peanuts in there. So he has to get there behind the plastic partition. So he has to get that peanut to come down. So he starts actually just throwing out all the sunflower seeds with his beak. He's just throwing it all out to
Just
get the
looking for that.
yeah, to get that peanut to drop. And the peanut drops, he grabs the peanut, puts it, he's got it inside his mouth and his beak, and I'm watching from the window. He turns to the window and holds his position as if to show me I got the darn thing. So I actually got got a bag of peanuts and broke the shells, broke them out of the shells, and I put a bunch of peanuts in there just to help the jays so they don't have to start throwing stuff all over the place. They're very cool to watch. They're fun birds.
I used to have a when I lived in Levittown. I had a mockingbird that used to keep my wife and I
Oh,
awake.
mockingbirds can be, in late June, right around this
Yeah,
time of year, the unpaired males. Oh my
right.
God, they don't
And
shut up.
yeah, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, shut up
I
already.
know, they just shut up. They're just goes, find a wife, do something,
Do something.
do
The
something.
funniest, and one morning, um, my this goes back way back. My daughter was maybe only 3 or 4 years old, and we were talking about the mockingbird, and he said, "Why the mockingbird don't go to sleep?" I looked at him. I looked at my daughter, and I said, "Well, the mockingbird is looking for something," and she looked at my wife and said, "Breakfast."
Yes. Christina Pedia says a Carolina wren made her nest in her house gas tank. Oh my. But because it was right next to the window, she got pissed and moved out and took the babies and moved and took the babies with her. I don't know what kind of it was a small wren built a nest, Joe. I swear to you, it was probably no bigger than this. It was the tiniest nest I think I've ever seen. Beautifully made, but very
Oh,
small.
you want to see a tiny nest?
Well, that's a
Right.
hummingbird.
Hummingbird nests are really. And I once saw something very rare. My daughter and I, we were looking out the window because we have hummingbird feeders here, and the hummingbird went up into the this deciduous tree. I guess it was a maple or maybe an oak. We followed it right up in the tree. He landed on a branch, and then we saw something that anybody ever sees. The hummingbird took a dump.
Oh, nice.
It's just like and like all of a sudden,
The hummingbirds, there's a certain hummingbird out west that actually hangs around with the sparrowhawk. The sparrowhawk can't catch the hummingbird. The hummingbird's too quick for it. But
right.
apparently, the sparrowhawk leads the hummingbird to where there's usually a bunch of insects, and the hummingbird takes care of the insects. They're actually hummingbirds, aside from the fact that they get the nectar, they're also actually very fierce
Very,
hunters.
very predators. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well,
Um,
here we have the ruby throat. In fact, everywhere east of the Mississippi, that's the only hummingbird you're going to see
yeah.
is the ruby throat. Meanwhile, if you go west of the
There's
Mississippi,
there's a whole
there's like
bunch
20 different Anna's
varieties.
hummingbird and the black-chinned hummingbird and the rufous hummingbird and
Hmm.
this humming. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, but Robert Brown would like you, Mr. Rayo, to again talk about the comet
Oh,
and where
let me tell you,
where you should be looking.
first of all, let me tell you, this comet was supposed to be a little piddling little thing. It wasn't expected to be very bright. Uh, we had two comets which already fell apart earlier this year in the spring. When they got close to the sun, they kind of vaporized or whatever. So when this one came along, everybody said, "Ah, oof, it's another bit." This one is probably going to be third time lucky finally for us. This morning, I had a couple of friends of mine who live out in Arizona. Theoretically, this comet is not supposed to be visible yet because it's too close to the sun. They saw it before sunrise in the bright twilight with their binoculars. They were able to pick it out. And one of my friends said, "It's too bad it wasn't dark. This thing would be a spectacle if it were just dark." But the comet is coming in and around the sun. Will make its closest approach on Friday. Then it's going to move out and back up away from the sunlight into a darker sky. And if this pans out the way I think it's going to pan out, Joe, in mid-July, like an hour and a half after sunset, you look in the western sky, there you'll see this comet with a tail. It should be really spectacular if it doesn't break up. And right now, it doesn't look like it. So the name of the comet is NEOWISE. It's an acronym for a satellite that is actually out there to track potential asteroids that may come too close to the Earth. But every once in a while, it stumbles across a comet. It stumbled across this one in March. We've been tracking it, looking at it, and it has been getting now really bright. It increased 100-fold in brightness in less than 3 weeks' time during mid and late June. And that's when the signal was, hey, guys, this may be something. And it looks like it is going to be something. So give it another couple of more weeks, and we may all be looking at a rather nice. But may I also point out, Joe, in ancient times, comets were looked upon as omens of evil. And there are a lot of superstitious people out there who may not want to see a comet in the sky, and
Right.
make it that it is responsible for all the craziness that's going on right now. There was one. There's an ancient jingle. 8 things there be a comet brings when on high at the horrid range: war, famine, plague, death to kings, wind, earthquakes, floods, dire change. Woo!
Smog.
The comet has a not the comet does not have anything to do with any of that. It's coming. It may get very bright. It'll be a nice, pretty sight in our sky. Do not attach it to anything crazy that's going on this
Right.
planet that we live
All
on.
right, so two more questions on the along the lines of astronomy. Braden and Doherty. There is a lunar eclipse on Saturday, and
You
Chuck
won't
Car.
see it.
What's that? Right. You
Yeah.
won't see it. And Chuck
Okay.
Cardillo asks, when was the last time that a comet actually hit the Earth?
Well, we think that the theory is that we were hit by the Earth uh, a little over 100 years ago in Siberia, Tunguska, June 30th, 1908. There was this thing that came out of the sky and blew trees down 40 miles away, and 100 miles away knocked over cows and registered on instruments, barographs all over the world. But unlike what we have like in Arizona, there's no crater. There's no hole in the ground where this thing landed. Instead, what is believed is that it was a comet, a very tiny comet that came in to our atmosphere and came in so quickly that the sonic boom it created knocked everything down, and it exploded or blew up before it had a chance to get to hit the Earth. It killed 1,500 reindeer and caused all kinds of devastation. But remember, this was northeast Siberia. You don't want to
Right.
think about what might have happened if this had blown up right over Midtown Manhattan. It wouldn't have been a very good day.
No, it certainly wouldn't. All right, so you know what? 7:45. I think we've seen enough. It's quiet. I'm thinking, Mr. Rayo, that if we come on tomorrow night, we're going to say the same thing that we said tonight, that we said last night and the night before. So you know what? You're let's take off. So we'll come back Sunday morning. How does that
Oh,
sound? Does that
okay.
work for
Well,
you?
that's okay. I notice here Mr. Briller said heading to Wildwood on Thursday for the July 4th weekend. Thought I would try something different on Briller Jeopardy tonight. Mr. Chiaffi will fill you in.
Yes. All right. Let
All my
me
best
hang on.
on your son on Friday. Thank you very much, Scott. And
All right, so hang on one moment. Uh, I'll bring up the trivia time with Briller Jeopardy here, and also I have Johnny Quest has one too, so we'll use his as well. So Here we go. Let me find it. Okay, so Jeopardy Les Brillards. What was the lowest temperature ever in Tom's River, New Jersey? And by the way, folks, the reason we mentioned Tom's River, New Jersey, is because it's one of the oddest observation stations in the Northeast. It can go to 100. There are instances where it can go up to 100 degrees, while everybody else it's about 5 degrees cooler over there. And it's also near the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, so that at night, on some nights, it can radiate so ridiculous where it could be 20 to 30 degrees colder in Tom's River than it is everywhere else. So
Well,
the
you know what? You know what? What you just said. I associate Tom's River conditions very much with what we see out on eastern Long Island, the Pine Barrens out there. And I know that the all-time record out on eastern Long Island is something like 20 or 21 degrees below zero. So why don't we go along those lines for Tom's River? I'll say minus 21 for the coldest
All right,
in
so I'm going to write these down because the answers are in a different post. So I got to look at that. Here's question. So you said minus 21. Question 2: how many lead actor Emmys did Raymond Burr win for Perry Mason?
You know what? Because Jackie Gleason never won an Emmy, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of very fine actors out there who never were bestowed an Emmy.
Mm-hmm.
Yours truly had 8 Emmy nominations and
I know
never
you're the
won.
Susan Lucci of
I was
meteorology.
certainly
Yes.
in meteorology. I'll say zero. I think Adela may have won a few Emmys, but I don't think that Perry himself, Raymond Burr, won an Emmy.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to that. I Love Lucy had a live audience of how many people?
300, I'd say.
Okay. The longest. Let's see. The chairman longest time in one job lasted 20 years. What was his occupation?
Longest job, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about?
I guess Scott.
A TV a TV personality who had a
I think no, him. The way I'm reading it.
huh, I don't know.
Okay.
I
Um.
that I'm
All
drawing a
right. So
blank.
he hasn't actually sent me I don't have the answers to these, by the way. So I'm. He's going to send me the answers afterward. Raymond Burr won, I think, 2 Emmys for Best Actor
Really? Okay.
in a drama. I think it's two, and also Barbara Hale did also win an Emmy
Right.
on one of those years. I think you're right on the 300. Okay, for I Love Lucy.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to the one occupation for the chairman for the last 20 years. And you said minus 21 for Tom's River. As I said, I will. You know what? I could see it, so I'm gonna stick. I'm gonna go with you. Minus
You know
20,
what I
minus 21. Some listen.
you
If
know
you if you put up West Hampton, I mean, since I've lived out here, I've seen minus 24 on one occasion. Um, so that's not unusual. Now here's another one. This is from Johnny Quest. This is named the only Category 5 hurricane to hit the Dominican Republic in the 20th century.
the only category and we I think we just had that, didn't we? Mitch? Hurricane Mitch?
In the 20th century.
And Mitch was not in the 20th century?
I'm thinking no.
Mm, I wouldn't know. I thought Mitch
I'll give you the year. See if you get 1979.
79.
Actually impacted us up here.
Oh, okay. It was either David or Frederick.
Right. It was David.
It was David.
It was David.
Okay.
Yes. So
Yeah, I remember David.
that was Johnny Quest. And he said it was the 20th century, not the 20. Yeah. I think Mitch was somewhere after after we turned the corner into the 2000s. I don't remember which
Hey, look, there's so
specific
many
year.
names rolling
Oh,
around
I
there.
know. Yeah, listen, it was one thing when we were younger. There were fewer years that we really in terms of the starting the name storms. Now we've gotten older. There's just way too many. I've forgotten most of them anyhow. I used to
I
know
remember
them
David.
all.
David brought us a pretty wild morning. We had like a tornado watch and heavy rain
It
and
was about
gusty
6 hours. We had gusts of 60 or 70 miles an hour. It was about six to
right,
7 hours of rain and wind. It
right.
happened very, very fast.
And
Uh,
Frederick did a number on the Gulf states, but it went well to our west, and we
right.
hardly saw anything
Sorry,
from it.
saw anything. And yeah, Frederick got rid of a couple of islands south of Alabama in the Gulf of Mexico. Dauphin Island disappeared because Frederick moved right over it
Wow.
and just wiped it out. So that was gone.
May
Um,
I may I say thank you to Nick Cortez or Cortez. Thank you on Super Chats, and we also have on Super Chats tonight Joe Miano.
oh, thanks, Joe.
Excuse
And
me.
thank you, Nick. Nick wanted to know if it goes to 90 degrees on Friday. Yeah, I think it's possible. Probably get close to 90 as long as the wind direction behaves itself. And Joe Mayano, thank you very much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Joe and I really appreciate it greatly. So let's leave it at that. So no show tomorrow, folks. No show Friday and no show Saturday. Enjoy the next 3 days. Joe and I will take a break. Uh, this show will be on a will be up on Spotify in a couple of hours in case you tuned in late or you're on the road or whatever you want to do it. But we're gonna these shows are gonna be put in podcast form now every night. Also, Weather in Five when we do Weather in Five. When I do Weather in Five in the mornings, most of the time, those will also be put on as a podcast. And again, you can go to Spotify, and I'll also put up a link to if you don't have a Spotify account, you can always make one. They're free. So anyhow, that's where we'll be. So we'll see everybody on Sunday.
And thank you very much to well, Brandon Doherty may have the answer here. Tom's River, he says minus 19 degrees, and David Carter says Mitch was in the late 90s.
Was in the late '90s, but did Mitch hit the Dominican Republic as a Category 5? I don't know.
Mitch 1998 says David Carter.
Okay. Well, you know what? We got to. I'll go back and take a look and see what the deal is with Mitch to see
Right.
if it was a 5 when it hit when it was around. I think it was a 5 at some point in its life cycle, but I don't know what. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember where it went.
Many of you millennials will not have any understanding of what I'm about to say, but if we do find out that it was Mitch, then we can sing along with him.
Yes, and follow the bouncing ball. Okay, that was Skitch Henderson. Who had the bouncing ball? Mitch Miller or Skitch Henderson?
I don't think Mitch. I think Mitch Miller didn't have a bouncing ball.
Well, one of them had a
Miller had
bouncing
words
ball.
that kind of scrolled, you know.
Oh, okay.
And Skitch was on the Tonight Show before Doc Severinsen took it over. I don't think he
Oh,
had anything
he had
either.
anything either?
Uh,
I'm thinking of some cartoon then where they used to tell you to follow the
remember,
bouncing ball.
you remember what Lucy once said about somebody who wanted to grow a beard, but he didn't want to do it because he'd be constantly scratching, and she said, "Why? Skitch and Mitch don't itch."
Right. Oh, good Lord. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy. Happy 4th of July. Stay safe, social distance, or whatever it is you're doing to stay safe. And we will, we'll
I'm going to
see you.
become I'm going to become a father-in-law on Friday. That's what's going to happen to me
That's right. Yes. Legally.
legally.
Yeah. And now your son can, and your son will be able to file married filing joint when he does his next tax return.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Well,
So
one day you'll have the patter of hear the patter of little feet and realize that they're not it's not your responsibility.
I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to when the first one or ones turn 5 or 6. You surprise them. Grandma and Grandpa are taking you to a very special place in Florida.
Yes.
Someplace.
Christinapedia
Hopefully the COVID-19 thing will be done by then.
Christinapedia points out that Mitch did not hit the Dominican Republic.
I'm sorry. All right.
Okay, so we're back to David. Okay,
All
it's
right.
8:79. Happy 4th. Spotify for a podcast. We will see you Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern.